Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Awards Buzz. I'm Abe Friedtanzer,
I'm Stacey Yvonne.
I'm Shadan Larki.
I'm Scott Menzel.
I'm Sari Cohen.
and we are here talking about the Oscars. We're going to look at what we call the specialty categories and the below the line races, which interestingly don't have as much to do with the big contenders for Best Picture and some of the acting prizes, but offer plenty of interesting things there. We'll start with Best International Feature. This is a category which most people think has three nominees because the other two people weren't sure what was going to be happening with them. Long gone are the days of The Seed of the Sacred Fig really being a contender. I'm not sure what really happened with that, but Emilia Perez is the most nominated film, has obviously been through a lot recently. People would have said it was the front runner, but now we are at the point where I'm Still Here, which also got a Best Actress nomination and a Best Picture nomination, could overtake it. Shadan, I'd like to hear from you first. What do you think is going to win here?
It's close. It's very close. I'm sticking with Amelia Perez because, spoiler alert, I think Zoe is gonna still win, and I think the song is still gonna win. And I think Oscar voters, when they like a movie, they like it. And I think the controversy is only gonna affect it so much. And I just think they like it enough to give it a win. And I mean, France has a stronger tradition in this category. Let's not forget that. I think, yes, people are catching up to I'm Still Here, but more people have still seen Amelia Perez. It's been in the conversation for so long, it's readily available. I think it's too big, and perhaps I'm going to be wrong, but I'm stuck with it so far, and I'm not going to let it go.
Yeah, I think Zoe and the song are going to be the only takeaways after everything that has transpired with it. So I'm going with I'm Still Here. I think that pushed its way to the front with everything. So yeah.
I think if it were a like a Spanish film or a Mexican film, then it would might have a chance. But being a French film, I think unfortunately is going to kind of work against it, especially with all like the controversial stuff, because it's kind of had issues with that since the very beginning, and so they've only kind of been exacerbated. So I think that I'm Still Here is going to slip in and be like, hey.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on the bandwagon too. I'm gonna say I'm still here. I just think that the damage that has been done for this campaign, although Netflix has, tried to skirt the issue with a lot of things, and they've done a really, sorry, they've done a really great job. But I feel like this last one, the way that the director handled it, is sort of the thing that kind of put the nail in the coffin for this winning this category. And I mean, I'm actually going to really blame the director on it because I think
Yeah.
that's what really killed it.
I will remind everyone that I predicted that Jacques Audiard and Carla would both be snubbed and not even nominated for Oscars. And what a
Mm.
different world we would be in now if we could separate those two and be like, well, they're not nominated, just all this other stuff is. But that's not how things went. I'm sure nowadays people would probably not nominate either of them. But to me, I go back to the example I've given of The Lives of Others beating Pan's Labyrinth for best was then best
Mm.
foreign film when Pan's Labyrinth actually won other categories and Lives of Others was only nominated for this race. I think Stacey's point about this not being a really a Mexican like it's a Mexican film about Mexico, but there's nothing particularly Mexican about it. I think that's the bigger thing than any of Carla's stuff recently. You could still separate it, but that dates back more. But more importantly, I think it's just a search for I'm Still Here. I think that film has been very heavily campaigning. I think the Best Picture nomination, while not entirely like completely shocking, was still pretty surprising. Was a sign that people are very much into it. And I've always felt this. I always try to watch all the shortlisted films for international feature, and some of them are like really about the country, and like that really makes a difference, that it like there's such a passionate, even though obviously there are voters from around the world, the fact that it's so much about the history of Brazil, I think really helps it. I do not think it's a done deal. I would not be surprised if all of Amelia Perez won. I would be surprised if something else won, because I just don't think, like, I think there's just so much support for I'm Still Here. So that I would say, I also will get to Fernanda, another conversation, but I just think I'm Still Here is peaking at the right time when Amelia Perez is, completely bombing at this moment. And so I think that hurts a
Correct me
little.
if I'm wrong. There was also, wasn't there a controversy, something tied to Amelia Perez with I'm Still Here? Basically, like there was some sort of I wasn't very widely
Yes,
covered,
it's
but
what started all this. That basically
oh,
Carla was
okay.
like, Fernandez people are coming after me. Everybody's like, whoa, she broke the Oscar
Oh,
rule. She can't
yeah.
disparage another candidate. And they're like, oh, that's not actually a thing. But have you seen her past tweets? Like, that's how this all started. Was
Oh,
that something that didn't
wow.
Yeah,
matter
I remember that. That's
led
what I
to all
thought.
that? And
Yeah.
so
So
the fact
that's
that this is
another
what we're
reason
talking
why I
about,
think it's gonna help push it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I would be genuinely shocked if Flo or the girl with the needle won. I think if for some reason if there was a vote split, it's obviously the seat of the sacred fig. But again, I don't think we're really in danger of that happening.
Mhm.
This brings us to another category that is an interesting one, which is documentary feature. I There are some very interesting nominees here. I think No Other Land is certainly the one that's gotten the most buzz throughout award season, and the fact that it doesn't have official distribution, that it's dealing with the conflict a lot of people are really still paying attention to. I'm not secure in it winning. I think it's definitely possible. It might not. I actually, Stacey, I know you're a fan of soundtrack to a coup d'etat. I think that is by far the
That's my
most
heart.
visually and the most creative of these films. And so if we're
Mhm.
looking from a purely filmmaking perspective, it's like Man on Wire, which was a documentary thriller. Like if you're looking and Summer of Soul, like if you're looking for a film that is cinematically magnificent, I don't see how you choose anything other than that. But I think this is an issue category for a lot of people.
And
Mhm.
I don't know a lot of people that watch Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat because it really is an issue documentary. Like it does have all of that in it, but I think it wasn't clear as to what it was. So people just thought, oh, it's another Summer of Soul, or it's going to be talking about music. It's called Soundtrack, and so yeah, it didn't get the right kind of attention, I think. But yeah, other than that, I could maybe see Black Box Diaries doing something, or even Porcelain Wars, but mostly because just the name recognition. It's like if you're like, oh, name a documentary. And the fact that Daughters wasn't on here was just really wild. The fact that Weldon Harper wasn't on here. And, there are a few other ones that we have the recognition for. And then you have these ones where on a public kind of general level, a lot of people don't know about these titles. So it'll be very interesting to see who was just like, this one versus, oh, I saw this and I really enjoyed it.
This is the category that I'm literally struggling the most out of all 23. I have no idea because I was actually very confident in No Other Land. I'm still predicting it, but I was very confident in it. But then it lost at BAFTA to the Superman documentary, which floored
Oh,
me because
wow.
I thought that Christopher Reeve in my thing was like an American icon. I did not realize that British people liked Christopher Reeve that much. So I just would have felt that if No Other Land had the passion that people are saying it's had all season long, why hasn't it won anything? It made sense for it to win at BAFTA. But then what I'm struggling with is, okay, if I move away from No Other Land, who do I go to? I think Porcelain War, I have it as my number 2 right now, but I mean, soundtrack could be, I don't know. I just don't know where the support would go if it wasn't No Other Land, which is why I'm sticking with it, but it hasn't won anything. That gives me some major pause.
Yeah, the porcelain war of it all is very interesting because they've been doing a really strong push for that movie. Especially feel in the last like week or two, which was like key, right? Because that's when voting was. They were really sending out a ton of emails. I think there was a couple Q&As for it. So I'm gonna lean that one because I think No Other Land seems to have the most momentum right now. But we've seen this before in documentary category where the one that has the most momentum doesn't end up winning. So I'm gonna go with Porcelain War.
That's hard. I'm with you. This is a very hard category for me. I'm just between yeah, No Other Land and Porcelain War. I think it's gonna be No Other Land, but also I agree with you, Shadan. Like, why hasn't it why hasn't it gotten more acclaim at this point? So yeah, this is a tough one.
And I will make things a little more chaotic by saying that right before this, I actually switched my prediction from Sugarcane, which no one has mentioned, because I think Sugarcane is very much an issue movie. It's something that has to do with a years-long tradition that has really impacted a lot of people. I think it is not necessarily seen as a current issue the way that No Other Land is. Black Box Diaries, which might be my personal choice, not format-wise, but like content-wise, because soundtrack, I think, again, is indisputably the most creative of these films. Black Box Diaries is specific in a lot of ways to one person's experience, but also about just the way that women have to move around in this world and defend themselves against things that they shouldn't. And so I think you have, again, it is a very strong year of really interesting films. I do think No Other Land has picked up so many precursor prizes, even if it didn't win at BAFTA. Because again, Superman is not nominated here, so you can't there is no Superman. Like soundtrack is not a feel-good movie or anything. Not that Superman is, but like Superman is an inspiring whatever. Like these are not inspiring films; these are disturbing films about important subjects. And so I mean, not that the soundtrack is super disturbing, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so,
There were heavy
I
issues.
I still think No Other Land is the front runner, but I do think Sugarcane is in number two. That said, 20 Days of Mariupol did win last year, and of course, the more similar subject. And I think the fact that we're still talking about Ukraine is important because people are like, oh, the Ukraine war has been going on for years, but it's been going on for years. It is a big thing that we shouldn't still have to keep talking about, but we are, and there are important things. There's also, as we'll see in our documentary short conversation, Once Upon a Time in Ukraine, which was a film that a lot of people thought would get nominated, didn't. So this is the Ukraine story this year, and so I think that there's definitely something worthwhile about that. But this is a nail biter because it's just a bit of a strange category, but again, a really, really strong one in a lot of ways. We all predicted the nominees for Best Animated Feature. It was the easiest category to predict the nominations. But as of right now, it is potentially one of the hardest because the Golden Globes went for Flow, Critics' Choice went for Wild Robot, and BAFTA went for Wallace and Gromit, which gives us much more of a three-way race than we would have had. Inside Out 2 and Memoir of a Snail, it's been nice knowing you. This is not your year. Who's still on the Wild Robot team with me?
I'm still on the Wild Robot team.
Yeah, it's 100%. I think Wallace and Gromit won because it was BAFTA, which is fantastic. Netflix has been doing their due diligence. They have been putting that movie out there, but specifically for UK audiences, these are beloved characters for them, and I can see that 100%. If they hadn't won, it would have been kind of the Cynthia thing where I'm like, you got to win on home court. Let's get it done. I think Flow was because it was mostly international press and, it was very charming and that kind of stuff. But I think Wild Robot be above and beyond. And really, I think Inside Out 2, I think they just stopped. I haven't heard anything about them at all. That's just really gone by the
Disney's
wayside.
like, we're done. We're done.
Yeah, we're good.
Have you guys seen? I have to just piggyback off of Stacey's giving good carpet. Have you seen the Wallace and Gromit memes from
Yes.
the carpet? The whole
They bring the little characters
they
out.
stole the show of the
Yep.
carpet. There is so much love for that movie. Yeah, it's for me, it's between that and the Wild Robot. I could see both of them
Yeah,
winning.
but they stole that campaign. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
wait,
yeah,
stole
but
it?
That
did it well.
campaign was stolen from oh my God, what's the name of the company that did it? They did Paranorman and Kubo the
They were inspired by.
Yes, but it was just so funny. And then they also did that with Marcel the Shell.
Yeah.
Remember they had the
Yeah.
little
Mhm.
shell everywhere.
Yeah.
I still have my little shell over there.
Who are not in the industry have been sharing pictures and sharing
Yeah.
all the so I'm like, okay, that was
A
smart.
brilliant move. That's
That was smart.
Marshall. I mean, I give Marshall credit for that. He comes
Mhm.
up with great campaigns. He always has. When he was at Disney, he came out with some brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
And even
Absolutely.
although it was on no one's radar, and I think it had more to do with just the timing, but the Ultraman Rising film, animated film, absolutely fantastic. I wish it would have seen a lot more in terms of awards, but Marshall's a big fan of the boots on the ground. If it's going to be marketed, then the people are going to be out there at every single award show, at every single event, at every single carpet. The director and the animators and the writers have been there with their figurines. Hey, this is who we are. So at the very least, they're going to be in mind, you know.
Yeah, and I hope they give Ultraman a little bit more of a push for Emmys,
Whew,
which
yeah,
maybe that'll work, right? Because that's
I hope
something
so.
that I think they also can push now. Superman, if I'm not mistaken, can also be pushed now for Emmys,
Mm,
which I think it would probably win there.
that's
I am
interesting. I like
sticking
that.
with the wild robot for right now, but I do have to say I'm losing confidence by the hour, and I think we're really underestimating Flow here. It got 2 nominations. It's in an international and animated film. We saw right before the voting closed a bunch of big name directors were coming out in favor of Flow. Everyone's seen the pictures of the people in Latvia lining up to see the Golden Globe. It's going to be part of the Criterion collection. We've seen the
Mm.
animation branch in recent years go for more creative animation. Last year, kind of with The Boy and the Heron, these sort of more out of the box animated styles. There is a ton of passion for that film, and if we're arguing that, I'm Still Here had enough time to gain, that's a different, in some ways, I understand that, but I'm saying like Flow could very easily sneak in. And Chris Sanders is very beloved within the animation branch. He's also overdue, so there is that narrative there, but I think Flow is right there. I really do.
So I want to the Boy and the Heron argument that you made. I think it's like people voted by name for that, right? Because it's Miyazaki, and I
Mhm.
think that was a big thing that kind of pushed that over the edge. Because I think we would all agree, even if you like Boy and the Heron, that's no way, shape, and
Marcel the
form
Shell
his.
was
Yeah,
robbed.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It was no way that was his best movie. But Flo, you're right. I mean, and again, the voting in the academy is always again tit for tat. Who's saying what? Who's speaking to this? Like, who did we get to come out? And it's funny because you could be right on that, Shadan, that a lot of people kind of came out and said Flo last minute.
But I also
I,
think that
yeah.
the Oscars are a little more conservative in those terms, where they value more kind of the global think versus, I haven't seen a lot of like crazy style, oh my God, I'm completely surprised, this little film that no one saw. When I'm win an Oscar, for the most part, it's like everyone saw it and they were talking about it, and it's kind of been the thing. I don't know if I think The Wild Robot has a lot more of that than Flow does. However, um, if Flo were to have a real chance at the Oscars, I would have expected them to win at BAFTA, at the very least, for having like an international kind of spotlight on it. So I don't know.
Well, I will say I almost cited an incorrect statistic, which was that every Wallace and Gromit film has won an Oscar. That is not correct.
Oh,
Every Wallace and Gromit film, short or feature, has been nominated, and all but 2 have won. So this is only the second feature. So that is not something to take lightly. I think the main thing is we have 3 films that are beloved. Like we don't like people aren't saying, "Oh, well, I liked Flow, but I didn't love Wild." Like people like all 3 of these movies a lot,
yeah.
and that is rare. I feel like you probably have to go back to was it Brave, Paranorman, and Frank and Weenie, I think we're all up against each other or something. Like
Yeah.
there's certain years where like there are 3 movies that really do well. That's what I was just talking to someone yesterday about how Happy Feet beat Cars. Like sometimes something that's an argument I would think for Flow in this case, or for Wallace and Gromit, because I do think Wild Robot is still the front runner, but I am not as certain. I think they're all very good, but I think there is, in a lot of ways, the most passion for Flow. I just asked somebody recently, what have you seen recently? Like, oh, Flow, that cat movie was amazing, But I think also the Wild Robot has a very theatrical quality to it, and we shouldn't underestimate the fact that that's a big studio with behind. There's I don't know. Just it's like when we talk about things that have won and won and won so many times, whatever. Like this is still the Oscar. This is still the Wild Robot's first chance at the Oscars. And so, especially in recent years, where we've seen films that were nominated for international and document, like not win, even though they were nominated in both places. I think that's still. I am again cautiously going here with the Wild Robot. As we pivot into our below the line categories, it is interesting to me. We get to our first category, best monkey in a movie, best visual effects, um,
Yes.
where it is likely that our front runner is the only film with no shot whatsoever of winning best picture, Dune Part 2. And I would just note that Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, which is a great comparison example, did win this prize back in 2002. I'm having trouble thinking of something besides Dune Part 2 that would win this.
Yeah, I agree. Dune Part 2.
You don't think Wicked is gonna?
I was gonna
I'm not
say
sure
if
people take
I
it
could see,
as
but
seriously. I think it's a pretty incredible visual feat. But I
Yeah.
think that Wicked, you can say the sets, you can say the costumes, the music, whatever. I'm not sure people think I think the visual effects are astonishing, and you don't realize how good they are. But you think about Dune, and I
exactly.
always there's just so much in Dune, and it's not just monkeys. Not that that's a bad thing, but I do think the fact that there are so many monkeys in Better Man, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Wicked makes it hard for people to be like, well, those monkeys are better than those. There's only one monkey in one of them. I don't know. It's silly, but and same thing with Alien Romulus. That's a franchise that back in the day was so cutting edge, and
Yeah.
now it still is. But I just don't think it. I don't know. I don't think it impresses the same way, especially in comparison to saying Dune Part Two is. Say what you will about the story or anything else, it is a visual feast for the eyes, and that stuff is not real. Like that stuff is effects in a really great, impressive way.
Mhm.
Very good point. Very good point.
So the question is, do we hear the same way? Is best sound also a lock for Dune Part 2, or do we prefer people singing?
It's very interesting because we're going to get into this when we talk about makeup and effects also, but visual effects really, if we were going to have the substance anywhere, it should be there. But
Mm.
instead, we have the substance in hair and makeup, and it doesn't quite mean the same thing as voters take it. Because when voters hear hair and makeup, they think pretty and or handsome or time appropriate or whatever. They don't think gore and like that, those kind of overall, which that should be under visual effects, one would assume. And so I think sound has the same issue where people hear, oh, best sound, and then they think, Wicked, it's a musical. Amelia Perez, it's a musical, and it's like, Whereas really Alien Romulus should have been under sound before it was under visual effects. The sound on that movie is so specific and so important. Conclave should have been under best sound versus, these ones. So it's really hard to say. I think Wicked is the popular choice, but I think Dune would actually have a better it would make more sense for it to win in this category.
Casey, you mentioned something important there, which is that like when people think of sound, they think of music, which this category does tend to favor, but we have three movies dealing with music in this category, and I have convinced myself that they're splitting their vote. BAFTA does have a pretty good correlation with sound. Dune 2 won there, which is why I switched my prediction to Dune 2. And as Abe mentioned, the second Lord of the Rings movie, the only two Oscars that it won were for sound and VFX. I think we're going to see a similar package here for Dune 2. That's why I switched my prediction, and that's why I feel relatively okay about it.
Mm-hmm.
And really,
I would agree with that too.
Dune 2 is the only a little bit for Wild Robot, but because it's animated, but for the most part, Dune 2 is the only one that's not necessarily a musical. Because A Complete Unknown is a musical. We'll talk about that a little later. But yeah, it's such an interesting.
I have the same
Yeah,
thing here
sorry.
with, oh no, I've just had the same thing here with Wicked, where I just feel like I really am split in between the two, and they both represent, to your points, like two different things, and it depends on like what you are either visually or audibly paying
Sonically.
attention to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I could see it go either way. It's hard.
Other thing is, I want to throw in two recent winners as a stat that I don't know what that means. We have the Zone of Interest from last year and Sound of Metal a few years ago. And I'm like, what does that represent to me? And to me, that actually leans toward Dune, because while Dune has all these huge things, I think of the subtle sounds of the planets and other things like that. To me, I think is what people are paying attention to. Um, and so I don't know, that it confuses me, those wins. Like I'm not sure what that leads to, because that might be something more like the ones you mentioned that weren't like Alien Romulus, something that what you hear and don't hear more so. But yeah, I'm not super confident about this. Well, I'd like to be confident about something. Have I said I was confident about anything? I was confident about visual effects, right? No monkeys. So there aren't monkeys in Dune,
These
right?
poor
Have I been
monkeys.
okay. Well, Stacey, you already mentioned the hair and makeup category. Do you want to start us off there?
Let's go. So hair and makeup. Oh, I agreed with the substance, but I did put a caveat of or wicked. And again, it depends on which direction people are thinking of. Are they thinking of kind of fun, exciting thing? Or are they thinking like, are they considering the gore and the transformations in the substance as hair and makeup? So it'll be interesting to see the way that shakes out. And then what was the other one?
Wicked.
A costume?
Oh,
No,
it's
no, makeup,
costumes.
and hairstyling.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
I think Substance winning that. I think it's been the front runner for most of this
Mhm.
award season, and I think again, knowing that it's an independent film and what they were able to accomplish with that is really impressive. And I think hair and makeup teams that do vote in this category are going to see that and they're going to note that.
And I
Yeah.
think, Scott, they've done a really good job of making sure people know what they had to go through. They had those people out there giving interviews left and right. And I think when it comes to the tech categories, as many brilliant Oscar prognosticators have said before, people tend to think of the most sound, the most visual effects, the most makeup, and when you substance is the most. Like Wicked, yes, it's pretty, but like when you think of what they had to like, substance is just every scene. If you didn't have that hair and makeup team in there, you wouldn't have been able to tell that story, period.
Right.
The
Totally.
only thing though is, have they been winning? Like they've been in a lot of these categories, but I'm kind of looking at even some of the ACETI awards or the, those other kind of awards where they're nominated in these categories. And I don't know. I don't know that the wins are necessarily coming through enough.
I also don't think Wicked is going to be taking home any major awards as we originally thought. Like,
Mm.
so I feel like if they are going to, if it is going to take home something, it is going to be in these departments. Something's going to hit for them. I would be surprised if they walked away with zero.
I have a few thoughts here. The first is I checked the MUHAS, I'm not sure, MUAS, the makeup and hairstyling awards. And not to be helpful, they have 5 feature-length awards. The Last Showgirl won one of them, Wicked won 2, and The Substance won 2. So that does not help us at all. That said, I do think that it's interesting because there were 3 makeup categories and 2 hairstyling, and The Substance won 2 of the makeup, and Wicked won 1 of each. And so I think if this was hairstyling, Wicked would probably win. But because it's also makeup, and that's what this category used to be called, I think The Substance is
Mm.
strong. What's strange to me is Nosferatu, I feel like, is so similar to The Substance in this whole awards process, and that it's like a genre piece that people were like, we're going to take it seriously. It's going to do well. It got a few nominations, didn't do as well as it could have. People said, like, originally it might be like Nightmare Alley and get a Best Picture nomination. That was never going to happen, but it could have happened. And so I'm intrigued because I feel like Nosferatu is sort of a dark horse in a few categories, but I think it's going to go home empty-handed because I think here, and we'll get to cinematography later, I think it just sort of like it's an easy second choice in a lot of ways. But when you look at Nosferatu versus The Substance, it's like a lot of Nosferatu you can't see, and that's part of the point. Whereas The Substance you can see it; it's all in the light, and you can witness it. And I think even if there's a strong message in Nosferatu, I think that hurts it here. Whereas The Substance, because it's so visible, I know they were hiding, Bill Skarsgård's look as Nosferatu, like before the movie. They want, I've kind of Orlok, they wanted to make sure to hide that. And so I wonder whether that was a disadvantage, even though it's clearly a very impressive technical feat.
The mustache is what ruined that for them. That's what ruined that for them. Mustache Gate. It's going back to Batman v Superman or whatever the hell it was, Justice League.
Well, we are
Love
looking at our next 2 categories, production design and costume design. I think it's safe to say that Wicked is a front runner in both of them, but I'd love to talk about what might unseat them because I do think when I think about The Brutalist, yes, I think about the music, I think about Adrian Brody, I think about the direction, but I also think about like that is a movie where like literally they're constructing the production design like in front of your face. And that is something that I don't think should be underestimated. That's that category is pretty incredible. Dune Part 2, again, I think of that black and white planet, I think of everything else. And Conclave, that is a huge undertaking. So I don't know that Wicked is as safe as it should be there, What does everybody have for number 2?
I think Conclave might pull one out for this. This is you're totally right, Abe. I'm finding myself conflicted over this category, but I think this is where we might see Conclave victorious.
And it's funny because I thought the Brutalist for kind
Oh,
of the same reason, where it was like,
yeah.
because you have the Brutalist style. It's all very, very specific, and you have the angles and everything is very stark, and, but it's all very intentional. And so I thought that they might eke one out in this category as well.
Wait, so you guys think that there might be a chance that Wicked doesn't win production design?
Yeah.
There
There are
shouldn't
strong
be, but
cases. There are strong cases to
this
I
is like second.
even
This
for
is number
Nosferatu.
two.
Less so for Nosferatu, I think, because even though that is a strong period piece, I don't see it competing with the others. But I think we can easily make a case for some of these other things. That said, I think that Wicked as a stage musical is already very ambitious visually with its sets, and the fact that they did all this, I think about them hitting the books during the song and other things like there's just and dancing through life, especially like there were some
yeah.
songs that like there is a lot of staging there, and it's not just about choreography; it's about the production design, and so. I don't see Wicked losing. I just see other things surging. And I think
Oh,
if
okay.
people don't
Right.
like Wicked, which I'm not sure that there are that many people out there, it's as many as we think, but I think like something like The Brutalist is really such a like the architecture is such a part of the film, and like architecture and production design have to go together. And so I don't know.
Well, also
Yeah,
with John
Stacey.
Chu not being being snoobed, I could definitely see people being like, let's give him as much as we can otherwise in these categories. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see a world where this doesn't win. I
Mm.
mean, I really don't. I think this is literally the one category where I would go down to a casino and put, you know,
I would do
$250
that
on a
Yeah.
for
table and just literally go like, okay, go on. I'm
I would say
confident in this.
it's safer for costume design because even though I have Nosferatu in second, actually I don't have that. No, I'm not sure what I think a complete unknown in some ways because there's so much in there is good, but I think Wicked, I don't see a way in which you vote for something else. I think Conclave, people can say, well, the sets are great, but like we've seen these papal uniforms before, these things, and Gladiator too. It's like we had whatever. And so I don't see anything. I don't see Wicked possibly losing costume design, whereas I
No.
do see other things winning production design.
Interesting.
Anybody else costume design? Do we have anything that could possibly take it down?
I think so.
Gladiator too. But like men in skirts. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, we should then move on to another category that is a little more up in the air, and that is Best Original Song. As many people know, Diane Warren is an institution who has been nominated many, many times and never won, and now has a tradition of being nominated for films people may not have seen. I do think the 688 is slightly more high profile than Four Good Days, a film that none of you have probably seen with Glenn Close and Mila Kunis that premiered at Sundance and went nowhere except for an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song. 688 is streaming on Netflix, which is a popular entity. But I think what a lot of people have seen recently is that this is the chance with Amelia Perez sort of faltering. That said, the song, I would hope that nobody is betting on Mi Camino. I do not see a universe in which Mi Camino eclipses the more popular song from Amelia Perez. But I think El Mal really is a Zoe showcase. And if we're saying that Zoe is very strong for the Oscar, which I believe after having a SAG conversation, you all should watch separately, I think that we do think Zoe is still strong. So I don't think Diane is the number one. I think she's firmly a number two, and El Mal is still a number one.
Okay, so my only caveat for this is, and I don't know if people have paid attention to it, but there has been a lot of like articles after this song won at Critics' Choice, about Carla being credited in this song.
Mm.
Interesting.
So because it's kind of I believe it's two or three people are credited on this song, and she's one of them.
Oh, wow.
Well, I think
So
she's in it, isn't like, doesn't she
yep,
have a small part in it or whatever? I
yep.
could see that. I do think though, like it was saying, this is more of a Zoe showcase for Amel. And I think Amel is going to outdo Mi Camino. However, I do think that because they're both there, if you are Amelia Perez and you're voting, I think that that then has the opportunity to kind of split. This is a strange category,
Yes, it
period.
is.
Like the Elton John of it all just kind of showing up. Has this been the only nomination that movie has gotten? Like, for this, and then, Sing Sing, if anything, best song wouldn't have been top of
Nope.
mind to put them in there. And so I think, yeah, this is a fight between Elmo and The Journey. We could have a thing of this is Diane Warren's time and let's just give it to her and call it a day, but Elmo has actually been winning, so
Yeah.
And
we'll
Yeah.
I
see.
checked the official Oscar site. It is not Carla, but Jacques Audiard who
Oh.
is credited as one of the
Okay.
writers.
Mm,
So,
okay.
and he's not on the other song. He's not on Mi Camino. So
Yeah,
I
but
don't know
nobody
what that
takes
means.
what I've learned about Selena Gomez, as much as I adore Selena Gomez, is that people just don't take her seriously yet. She hasn't crossed over enough.
Well,
Well, that's a
she's not credited either. She's not on Mi Camino
No,
either. It's not.
I know, but it was performed by her. That's what they did at Critics' Choice. They
And
had
I
her
do
as
think
there as part of performance.
there's something to a song being performed in a movie. I think, Jai Ho winning for Slumdog, and some other, like, there's definitely is something to that. Like,
not
you
too,
may
not
remember
too.
that I watched Never Too Late, Elton John Never Too Late right before we did our Zoom because that was the only film I hadn't seen. But all I needed to watch was the end credits. Like, I watched the whole thing, but like the song is the end credits. The fact that El Mal is so central to
Yep.
Zoe and her character, and if
Yep.
we are pretending as Netflix is that she is the only main character in the film, as they're doing a campaign, then this is El Mal. This is the character's song.
Yeah.
Love it.
Scott, do you think that the presence of Jacques, because if Elmo wins the Oscar, he's winning an Oscar because he is one of the credited people like on the Oscar website. So do you think that that is enough to pull people away from? I don't think so.
I don't think
I
enough
don't think
people will
so
make
either.
that
No.
connection.
Uh-uh.
Yeah.
We're
And
not they're not researching, they're not going through this
I would
the level of
argue-
detail that we are.
I would argue there is a certain percentage of people that actually want to see Jacques Audiard win something. So they're like, we don't want to give you the director prize, we don't want to give you screenplay. Here's an Oscar for this song. Again, I don't know how big of a percentage that is, but I would argue that they exist because yes, there's been backlash to this movie, but I don't think 13 nominations should be taken lightly.
Nope.
That has to
I
mean
agree.
something.
Mhm.
Again, the Academy is becoming more and more international. That has to mean something. And I adore Diane Warren. I would love to see her win, but I just don't see why this is her year. I think if anything,
No.
they might as well just give it to Elton John and Brandy Carlisle. Like I don't.
Yeah, at least they're two beloved musicians. I mean, are we all in agreement? This is like such a weak category
It's
in
such a
general. Like it's
strange,
just
yeah.
like
Yeah.
I would have
these are the
predicted Kiss the
songs we
Sky
have.
from Wild Robot. If Kiss the
Me
Sky had been
too.
nominated, I
I'm
think that
shocked
would
it
be
was
Totally.
on
winning.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
I don't know. But that is an excellent transition into Best Original Score, where I have said since the beginning, Challengers did not get nominated. I have always thought this was The Brutalist versus Conclave. But even though Volker Beltman, who did Conclave, won for All Quiet, bumping out Justin Hurwitz for Babylon, I don't think Conclave has been present enough. And I feel like The Brutalist is a solid frontrunner here.
Yep.
Stacey, I believe you're backing a different horse.
I said that I could see Wicked doing this. Now, I do have a question real quick. How does animation fare in this category? Because
I
yeah,
believe Soul and Up are the most recent winners. I
Okay.
feel like the problem is those were the front runners all season long. I don't think it's like like back in the day. There was the musical and comedy score and the dramatic score, whatever. Like, I feel like statistically it is not good for animated films because unless they were the season long front runner. That said, Challengers won at the Golden Globe. So, like, what is the front runner this season? I still think it's The Brutalist.
mhm. Well, that's why I was saying is that I was surprised that Challengers wasn't in this category because that is a score heavy, like that movie depends on that score. And the reason I asked about animation is because I think people kind of see that as just inclusive, like, oh, it's an animated film, of course it's going to have music, and so they don't take it as seriously as like a drama film, and kind of what we're saying. Wicked is kind of in that interesting space where you can see people really trying to take it seriously because it is so beloved. It hasn't gotten to that overly loved backlash, but not enough for them to kind of give it the kudos that it really deserves. So I think even though it's number 5 on on Gold Derby's list, I actually think it has more of a chance for the reasons that we talked about, is because I don't think they're going to take any of those top ones, unfortunately. And so I think if people were looking for a way to award Wicked, it would be in these kind of categories.
Your point about the animated, I was just doing some quick checking, and it is not different than I thought, but ultimately Pocahontas was a year where they had a split musical and comedy and then dramatic. Otherwise, you have Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Up, and Soul. And while the Wild Robot music is certainly great, I'm not sure you can put it in the same category as those, just in terms of buzz.
But it's also Chris Bowers, and he is like
Certainly,
hot right now. So
I think if it really was, as I've been saying, Brutalist versus Conclave, I think there could be a vote split, and that's the case. But I'm not sure Conclave was ever as strong as I thought it was.
Which is crazy because it's a fantastic score. But again, I also think that people think of score versus like diegetic kind of music and a thing as the same thing. And it's like, not quite. So
it's also a strong case as you make for Wicked, because I think Emilia Perez, I always said I had trouble differentiating the songs from the songs from the score, but I think at that point, this one, that's not really a player here anymore. So I think Wicked gets all the attention for that kind of vote. And so it's hard to quantify. What do you think, Sari?
I know, I totally agree. I don't even have anything to add. I'm like, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm just kind of at a loss.
Do you think it's the Brutalist, or you think it's Wicked?
I'm tied in between both. Again, I think these are kind of like, it depends what mood you're going for. There are two totally different ends of the spectrum. I do think, again, going back to like, if Wicked's not going to walk away with one of the major awards that we all thought that it might have, this would be a category that it should win. On the other
Well,
hand, oh no, go ahead.
oh no, I was also going to say, I don't know too many people that I've talked to who talk about Brutalist and was like, oh man, that score. Let
No,
me
but
tell
What?
you.
but if you
Really?
For the
I do.
Brutalist?
I don't know.
Oh
Oh,
my
I
God.
haven't.
I
That's
think the
wild.
score of the movie is the freaking selling point. I think the
It's
movie works
fine.
because of that.
It's phenomenal, but Stacy's right. It's not really buzzed about, I think, apart from like maybe critics or people who are really involved. It's not like when you think about it, just I think the general public would
I
be
think
like,
it's so
"Oh,
much more
Wicked."
visual.
It
Yeah.
just is that your brain goes there, but yeah, when you actually break down the quality and you think about like what is deserving of an award, I mean, yeah, The Brutalist it is phenomenal in this department. So. Yeah. It's gonna be interesting to see the mood of it all. To see like I feel like when the awards start going out, you're probably gonna see a trend in which direction it's going. Like, do people want something more vibrant and upbeat, or is it gonna be more of like a serious undertone? No, kind of.
Well,
Well,
I like what Abe was saying about because this was a season almost that was almost seemed as kind of boring at the beginning of the season, where you're like, oh, we got all, but this is around the time that we were like, oh, Angelina's a lock for best actress, and now it's like romp romp. So there has been a lot of excitement kind of instilled into these parts, which is so interesting to me.
I
Mhm.
was gonna just add that I think this will be a real true testament to controversies, right? Because every film
Mm.
has had some sort of controversy cycling it, except for Conclave, right? Like Conclave, to my knowledge.
All of them, yeah.
So it's the Vatican that did it all along, is what we've learned. Um, it's weird. It's the only one that hasn't kind of had a big like moment. There was the whole cinematography with Wicked. I mean, Amelia Perez has had, countless issues. Brutalist had the
AI,
AI
yeah.
thing, the intimacy coordinator with Honora, the Pretty Woman comparisons, like how many times I'm going to see this movie. And yet, Conclave, but like, yet, I think again, the one thing that I listening to everyone talk, and this weird thing that I have never understood is why we put so much backing into BAFTA. I mean,
Mm,
BAFTA, especially over the last couple of years, has been really off on like a lot of these categories.
interesting.
Let me introduce our next category by citing the
They're
recent
big
BAFTA winner.
brothers.
I'm not joking. I was
Okay,
literally
go
about to.
ahead, go ahead, go
Um, Best cinematography. The
ahead.
Brutalist won there. Nosferatu, I was like, well, it won the American Society of Cinematographers Award, but it's not; those haven't happened yet. We're doing this, even though you'll be watching this video after they've happened. Basically, Nosferatu won at the Critics' Choice, and so I think that those are the two films that are in the running for this. I think Emilia Perez is out. I think Maria is probably out. I think Dune Part Two. I don't really see it, but
Really?
I think The Brutalist, there's so much of it, right? And like
Yeah.
it's so long, there's so much cinematography, but also like
Yeah.
it is pretty dazzling. It really adds to the sense of like what an ordeal this guy goes through. Like you just see it and you really feel it visually. Nosferatu, I'll make the same argument I made before that because of the darkness of the film, which works very well to its advantage, I'm not sure you gauge it the same way.
Hmm.
And I think overall, just The Brutalist compared to Nosferatu is just that much more beloved overall. Do we think this is going to be The Brutalist or something else?
Well, I'm going to
Brutalist.
say something absolutely crazy, which is I would not be surprised if Maria jumped out here. Because that movie has been through the ringer and I know it has some diehards, and the fact that it couldn't get up for costumes, it couldn't get up for hair and makeup, I think if anything people are going to be like, we got to give Angelina something. Like, let's just throw it in there, because all the rest of these are very much run of the mill. The one that, of course, I'm still upset about was My Beloved Nickel Boys. I thought Jomo should have been in here, and that would have been amazing to see. But yeah, I think Brutalist is probably going to top it out, if anything, just for recognition. Um, Dune might eke out something, but I
It,
I
think
it's
will
it's
note,
yes,
it's it's
Brutalist.
too much of a repeat for Greg Fraser
Yeah.
on this from the first one. And I
and
don't
Dune
think the
did
movie
yeah.
looks any, that much different in terms of that. I listen, I'm just gonna call it how I saw it. Like it didn't look that much different. So like you already gave it the one, you don't need to give it again.
I
Scott,
will
are
say,
you
Stacey, to
going?
your sorry, John, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna ask Scott, are you doing Brutalist for score? Is that what you landed on at the end, or are you
Oh,
going
on the
elsewhere?
score. Hold on. I'm going back to score. Score is definitely Brutalist. Yeah.
Okay, the reason why I bring this up is because The Brutalist is really a fascinating property.
Mhm.
Because originally I thought, and I still kind of feel this way, of like there's a broad spectrum of love, clearly evidenced by the 10 nominations. But now, and I'm kind of thinking like, okay, if Adrian Brody is winning actor, certain categories have to go along. But now I'm just wondering like how much love is there for the film versus Adrian's win just being more about Adrian and his own narrative. I do have the Brutalist both for score. I think that score has become iconic, the sort of the goom goom.
Hmm.
When you think of the Brutalist, you think of that score. And I have it for cinematography as well. And we mentioned with the substance, people really admire the fact that they were able to pull this film together with a limited time and budget, and that's very much true for the Brutalist as well. Don't forget, Brady Corbet has been working on this movie for 7+ years. Originally, it had a whole other cast. COVID happened, so I think there's a lot that people really admire about that film, and these sort of below the categories are going to be very telling. And I just think when you think of the brutal, I agree with you, Abe. I mean, I do think of the production design very much so. I just don't think that's happening. And I think
No.
the other iconic parts of that film are the cinematography and their score. I think the Maria nomination is very much just love for a beloved cinematographer like Ed Lackman.
Yep.
I don't think that really, I just, yeah, I feel pretty good about the Brutalist in cinematography and score. I just think that makes sense.
So The thing about The Brutalist for me is that because I've seen it twice and I absolutely loved it, but when I think of score, I think about Pennsylvania Steel, just the kind of stuff in the background. Um, but when I heard the score, I was like, okay, this is epic, and it's an epic score for an epic movie. It didn't really jump out to me. It fit, which is what scores are really supposed to do. It's the ones that kind of challenge your way of thinking about them, like a Challengers, with that score, which was so overt and so different. And it still fit, but it challenged you to kind of think of it in a different way. I was thinking, I kind of akin to back to Babylon. And that movie drove me crazy. But for being as long as it is, I was like, oh, the score is going to be chaotic jazz. It's like it's Damien Chazelle. So it's like, of course, this is what it's going to be. And that's what it was. However, it did win, for best original score and for like production design and costume, that kind of thing.
No,
Go ahead.
it lost to All Quiet.
In 23?
Yeah, that was the composer of Conclave. It was a shock. I know. Craziness.
Really?
But
What am
does
I
that hurt?
looking
Does
at?
that help or hurt your argument?
Oh, well, no, I was just going to say, because regardless of kind of how I feel about The Brutalist, I'm sure it's probably still up there. And I can see people being like, this is the one. And like Shadan was saying, if we're going to predict Adrian Brody, then it should, follow suit with some of these other categories. I think that there is a love for that film, but also specifically Brady Corbett and everything that he's done to kind of make this film happen.
Yeah, I have to
Yeah.
say from when I really tried to look at all these things from a full picture kind of point of view from it, and I mean the thing that stood out to me about the Brutalist, and it hasn't changed this entire award season, like despite whatever controversies everyone wants to throw, there's a passion there for filmmaking.
Mm,
And when you watch that movie, regardless of how you feel about Brady, he is there's like heart and soul, like he poured everything into that, and you can feel it in every frame of that movie. And we've talked about this, Stacey. I know you and I have both kind of gone back and forth about this. Like, there are so many problems in The Brutalist with the structure and the tone and stuff from the first act to the second act. Um, but the one thing that I never walked away from with that movie was passion. And I feel that that's why I think the score and the cinematography, I mean, I
mm,
agree in certain extents to the production design, but then when I look at production design at Wicked and certain scenes, like it's very flashy and big moments, and this is kind of very quiet and subtle, which in traditionally in Oscars doesn't really quiet and subtle doesn't win production design. So that's why I say that. But the score and the cinematography and like the direction of that movie, like I'm sorry, like I mean I'm the John Chu fanboy here, but I mean I would vote for Brady and director any day because of like I know his heart and soul went into that, and I know the struggles that he had, and they've really made that known over the last couple of months of like all the struggles that he went through. And I mean, there's something that says a lot to filmmakers who know from the ground up. And I think even like
mm,
really well-known filmmakers like Quentin or John M. Chu know what that struggle is. They know what it was like to make a small film and goes through all those struggles. I mean, hell, I mean, to go back to our TV category that we were talking about with in SAG, that's the thing that the Hacks people have. They have a horror story every single season about, oh, this is the COVID thing happened, the strike happened. They always have like this terrible story, but as a filmmaker, and that's who's voting in this like a lot of these categories, they're gonna feel that. They're gonna feel that in the movie, and that's why I think The Brutalist is still even a strong contender for Best Picture for that very reason.
mm.
We're going to take some more time in another session to talk about the top categories. I want to just say to Stacey's big swing for Maria, the only time in the age of the expanded Best Picture race that a film that was not nominated for Best Picture won was Blade Runner 2049. And unlike Maria, that was a front runner all season long. Otherwise, you have to go back to 2006 for Pan's Labyrinth. I want to finish us off with best film editing, and I want to note a surprising statistic here, which is that The last 2 years, Oppenheimer and Everything Everywhere won. Otherwise, you have to go back to Argo to find a Best Film Editing winner that won Best Picture also. So I think a lot of people are looking to Best Film Editing to be like, Anora, Conclave, what's the front runner? What's going to happen? But I don't know that it's going to be indicative. I think a win for Anora would certainly be a big deal. Also, people following would know that Sean Baker is nominated. He did the editing for that, and so that's one of the awards that he could win himself. The American cinema editors have their awards after the Oscars, so that will not help us, although they also have comedy and drama separate. So Anora and Conclave could easily both win because of that. I think for this one, I'm actually going with Anora. What do other people have? Sari, do you want to? You haven't spoken in a little bit.
I mean, listen, I'm in between Anora and Conclave. But I'm putting Conclave at the top here. I definitely think, given the nominees that we have, I mean, it's such an interesting fact. I didn't realize when you break apart like the editing from Best Picture, because my brain, I mean, wouldn't it be something if The Brutalist won? Because I personally think it's going to take Best Picture. Um, but I think they're going to dole it out a little bit, and I do think this is one that Conclave is going to take.
To your point, Abe, I guess this is just the question of now we get into the Anora and Sean Baker of it all. He's nominated for 4 Oscars. There's people that are predicting he's going to win all 4, which would be picture, director, screenplay, and editing. And I just don't think that that's going to happen. Now, do Oscar voters are they gonna think that way, or are they just gonna go Baker, Baker, Baker? But I just don't see a world where he wins 4 Oscars for Anora. And I think Conclave, I know, Scott, to your point, BAFTA has become increasingly maybe not as predictive, but it did win at BAFTA. And there is a lot of passion for Conclave, so I think it just makes sense that they would give Conclave editing. And to your point about, if we want to argue for Baker for a second, to your point about sort of Brady Corbet and the passion that he pours into filmmaking, I think that's very much what's carrying Baker and Anora for a lot of this season. But I think there's other places to award him. But I think this is just a fascinating, in terms of Baker being in so many categories. But I mean, Chloe Zhao was nominated for multiple Oscars for Nomadland, and she did not win all of them. She just won for director, and picture, right? Or yeah.
Yeah.
If I saw
Jesus.
Sean winning, I think this would be the category. For whatever reason, Anora, the editing kind of resonates with people. And I mean, I think it's a good choice. Conclave is a very good film. I don't know that this is necessarily the category that I would like to see a win in. I think that there are others that are going to be a little closer, but this feels like it's going to go to Sean, because I think that he's not going to get director.
You know what's crazy about this
I agree.
category is that the 2 musicals, again, we're looking at Gold Derby as we're doing this conversation, are the ones that are ranked the lowest right now. Which is fascinating, because if you watch any musical movie, musical sequences actually have the most cuts.
Mhm.
And I think people were really shocked when like Bohemian Rhapsody won film editing. But I think because people were like joking about how poorly edited like certain scenes were early on. But when you look at the musical sequences in Bohemian Rhapsody, they're pretty damn phenomenal, the way that they're captured. So I'm like weirded out about this, like that they're so low. Because in my mind, if I was going to pick a film editing category, I would actually pick one of the musical movies, but
I
popular
think people
opinion
set
tells
their
me not.
they set their bars differently when it comes to musicals. And again, we'll talk about this once we get into the upper categories. But when it comes to editing, they're like, it's kind of already built in for them. Like, oh, of course they should be good at editing. But these other ones, they have more editing things because they're not used to, or, whatever. So it is an interesting kind of, cognitive dissonance.
I
I mean,
also don't think, yeah, Scott.
real quick, besides Conclave winning like a couple below the line awards, right? Which I know it's been very sporadic, and I think that's what makes some of the below the line categories interesting this year, is that there hasn't been like a consistent winner in some of them, except for, like I said, production design. I think Wicked has won all of them. But Conclave has only won screenplay consistently, correct?
Mm.
Am I right on that, Abe?
Yep.
That it's been the one that it's been kind of like winning that across the board places.
If it wins ensemble at SAG, it'll come in with SAG and the BAFTA, but just screenplay otherwise. So like it's not it doesn't have, you're right, it doesn't have the technical support below the line that would otherwise propel it to a win, which I think we've said from the beginning when we got the shortlists. Anora doesn't have that either. Anora is not a technically recognized movie. You know, Wicked and The Brutalist and Dune Part 2 and The Substance are going to win all the tech prizes, and then not going to be in content. Like it's interesting because that's not everything that should be, but some of the bigger budget, bigger epic kind of films are not what we're looking at for Best Picture. We're looking at theoretically a three-way race, if I'm hearing everybody correctly, between, you know, Conclave is the biggest in some ways, The Brutalist, which is made for very little money, and Anora, which is the most bare bones. So it's interesting to see that. I do think that Brutalist is for film editing is definitely something to consider if the film is going to have a big resurgence. I think I know it's very long and we've said a lot about the second act and other things. I still think that there's a lot to work with there, and it is still a pretty exquisitely edited, if not necessarily as tightly as some people would like it. You know, I'm not sure people are like, well, you could take out this part. It's like it's just that it's long. But I still do think Anora is probably going to win here. I do not think Sean Baker is going to win 4 Oscars. I think he's going to win 3. But I will leave everyone in suspense. And we will return for another conversation all about the top categories. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Abe Friedtanzer.
I'm Stacey Yvonne.
I'm Shadan Larki.
I'm Scott Menzel.
I'm Sari Cohen.
We look forward to bringing you more soon. Thanks for being with us.